The movie begins at a remote institute where prisoners are taken for psychological treatment. Each time they're woken up from their sleep. Dr. David, one of the lead psychotherapists at the facility, is having a conversation with an inmate who has just been pulled out of sleep. David shows the prisoner a video of his daughter, who is clearly devastated, talking about how hurt she is because he killed her mom. The prisoner is deeply upset by the video and insists that he was wrongly accused, claiming he didn't actually kill his wife. David listens patiently, handling the situation in a calm and professional manner. After the session, the prisoner is placed back into a small chamber filled with water where he will continue sleeping. David oversees the process, watching closely as the man is submerged. The caretaker, a man named Valley who looks after the sleeping bodies, comments that he can tell what the prisoners have done just by looking at their faces. He guesses that the man they were putting to sleep was involved in a crime of passion. David jokes that Valley should take his job if he's so insightful, but Valley replies that he's content just taking care of the bodies and would leave the poor souls to David. Taken aback by these words, David says Valley makes him sound like a priest. Valley agrees, saying that the prisoners confess their sins to David, and he sends them off for penance when they go back into the pods. Later, David goes home, feeling drained from the day. He showers, trying to wash away the stress. When he steps out of the bathroom, he sees his girlfriend Viola sitting on their bed, playing a small piano. David compliments the piece she's playing, and they share a kiss, falling onto the bed together. The next morning, David wakes up to find Viola holding a picture that he had hidden inside a book. She looks upset and asks if the woman in the picture is his ex. Realizing that he's hurt her, David apologizes and reassures her of his love. In the middle of their conversation, David's phone rings. It's Valley asking him to come to the common room immediately. When David arrives at the common room, Valley introduces him to Andrea, who apologizes for calling him down in such a hurry. David learns that Andrea is there to take over his position in a month and has arrived early to observe how David works. Feeling blindsided, David later speaks to the head of the facility to express his surprise at the news of being replaced. She explains that David has been working there longer than anyone else, and she's concerned about the toll it's taking on his mental health. She believes that constantly absorbing the pain of the prisoners could be harmful to him if he continues. The next day, Andrea joins David during his sessions and starts asking questions about the work. When Andrea asks about the images displayed on the large monitor, David explains that the pictures are chosen by the prisoners to help keep them grounded during their sessions. The prisoner who is awakened that day is a woman sentenced to 9 years of sleep. David gently reminds her of her crime, explaining that she had accidentally killed 2 young boys while driving on wet asphalt after having a few drinks. As she recalls what happened, the woman goes into shock but manages to calm down after some effort. Later, David takes Viola out to dinner and opens up about what's happening at work. Viola offers to let him stay at her house temporarily until he can find a place of his own, and David gratefully agrees. The next day, David returns from work and heads to his office, only to find Andrea waiting for him. Andrea tells him that a prisoner had gone through an emergency awakening because his file was empty. Puzzled, David checks the system and confirms that Andrea is correct. There is no record of this man in their database. While they're trying to figure out the situation, the prisoner, appearing smug, addresses David, claiming he knows who David is and why he's there, but he refuses to share any more information. Although David wants to put him back to sleep, Andrea argues that they can't do that until they run the necessary tests, so David instructs Andrea to keep an eye on the prisoner. David then heads to the area where prisoners' personal belongings are kept, attempting to open a locker, but his key card doesn't work. Suddenly, alarms start blaring, and David rushes to the pods, noticing a red light indicating a problem. He finds Andrea standing in front of the pod and chastises him for leaving the prisoner unattended. David quickly fixes the oxygen issue in the woman's tank. Valley arrives just in time to witness David and Andrea arguing, and in an attempt to keep things under control, Valley pulls out a gun, pointing it at both of them to calm the situation until they can sort things out. The 3 of them head to David's office, where they find Viola tending to the prisoner, who is pretending to be injured. As Valley tries to assess the man's condition, the prisoner suddenly grabs Valley's gun and shoots him in the chest. Chaos erupts as the prisoner takes Viola hostage, pressing the gun to her head, and forces David to handcuff himself to a chair. David complies, but then, to his shock, he watches as Viola and the prisoner start kissing, leaving David bewildered. The unexpected twist doesn't end there. The prisoner abruptly turns on Viola, gripping her neck with intense force, choking her. Desperate and fueled by adrenaline, David manages to free his hand from the cuff and, in a swift move, stabs the prisoner in the neck, killing him instantly and saving Viola. David suddenly wakes up and finds himself in a familiar chair with his head shaved. His daughter, Dr. Reza, is sitting across from him, asking if he remembers anything. He tells her that he knows he's in prison for killing a prisoner, glancing at a picture of Viola, the one he chose to keep. Reza asks him if he remembers how they met, and David flashes back to his first encounter with Viola. She had come to his office with her son to leave a message for her father, who was imprisoned. David later learned that Viola hadn't wanted to come, but her son insisted. As David delved deeper, he discovered that Viola's husband, Carlo, was actually in Walgett, having been convicted of murdering a woman he was having an affair with. Intrigued, David sought Viola out and found that she played in a string quartet. He attended one of her performances, and after the show, he waited for her outside. They struck up a conversation where David complimented her talent. After asking about her son, David offered to buy her a drink at a bar, and Viola confided that she hadn't been going out much lately. She then invited David to her house for a glass of wine, and that night they ended up sleeping together. David goes on to explain to Reza that he had killed Viola's husband, but Reza interrupts him, correcting his version of the story. She reveals the truth. After David and Viola had been dating for 11 months, Viola met a man who claimed to know Carlo well. He explained to Viola that all the evidence against Carlo had been planted and he was innocent. Desperate, Viola begged David to review the files to prove Carlo's innocence, but David refused. Driven by his jealousy and desire to keep Viola, David deleted all the files on Carlo, making it seem like the pod was empty, and then he sabotaged the oxygen tank, causing Carlo to suffocate to death. David believed that in time, Viola would forget about Carlo. However, David now remembers that his actions didn't just cause Carlo's death, they also indirectly led to the death of another prisoner. The doctor informs David that he still has 10 years left on his sentence, but has the option to serve it on parole. Having already served 10 years, David is now eligible for the reintegration program, but the doctor warns him to follow the instructions precisely. David is assigned an apartment and told he must attend a support group every week. He is required to sign in every day and isn't allowed to leave the city. A police officer can search his apartment whenever they need to, and David must report to the precinct at any time if called. David finds a job as a clerk at a hotel. One night, while walking home from work, he sees a poster of Viola advertising that she's performing at a club. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he decides to go in. He watches Viola from a distance, feeling a surge of nerves and guilt, and eventually tries to leave. Just as he turns to go, he hears someone call his name. Viola angrily confronts him, saying he shouldn't have been released so early after everything he had done. She tells David that he caused her many painful years and demands that he never show his face to her again. Feeling deeply ashamed, David quietly leaves. One night, David's old friend Valley comes to visit him. Noticing David's sorry state, Valley seems saddened by how far his friend has fallen. He hands David a gun, explaining that there are many people out there who might want to harm him. Valley urges David to take the gun for his own protection, emphasizing that he needs to be able to defend himself if the need arises. A few days later, David finds a photo of a fountain left in his house. Intrigued, he decides to investigate and heads to the location. As he looks around, he is shocked to see Anna's husband, one of the prisoners and patients who was presumed dead after David unhooked the oxygen from Viola's husband's pod. Confused and curious, David approaches Anna's husband, who reveals that Anna had been investigating corruption within the prison system when she was imprisoned. He also discloses that she had been working with Carlo, Viola's husband. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, David rushes to Viola's house. He begs her to listen, explaining what he has discovered and his growing certainty that they've been set up. Viola recalls that the man who approached her with information about her husband's innocence was part of a ministerial group responsible for creating the hypersleep system. Together, David and Viola track down this man as he's leaving his office. They confront him about the innocent people being wrongfully imprisoned. The man confirms their suspicions, revealing that David too was innocent all along. He warns them to stop their investigation, cautioning that it could be dangerous for everyone involved. With the truth out in the open, David and Viola rekindle their relationship, their love reigniting after uncovering the conspiracy. Viola apologizes for dragging David into the mess by asking for his help with her husband that fateful night. They spend a passionate night together, reconnecting after all the turmoil. The next morning, as David returns to his car, he discovers a memory device hidden inside a hat that he had retrieved when he was released from prison. Curious, he opens the device on his phone and finds a video of himself talking to Carlo. In the video, Carlo explains that the inmates are fed false dreams while they sleep and insists that he didn't kill his wife, as everyone believed. He was framed. Suddenly, David hears a scream in the background. Looking up, he sees two men dragging Viola out of her house and forcing her into a car. Panicked, David realizes that the danger is far from over. David follows the car to a large mansion, sneaking his way inside. He spots Andrea, who is now a well-known doctor, and confronts him privately. Andrea confesses that while David reopened old files, it was Andrea who actually killed the prisoners, sealing their fate. David takes Andrea hostage and drags him in front of President Costa, demanding Viola's release. David tries to expose the truth about hypersleep, explaining how it erases a person's identity. President Costa argues back, saying that hypersleep has made the streets safer for everyone. From another room, a police officer brings Viola in and hands her over to David. The president, wearing a smug smile, tells David to enjoy his new life. Furious, David points his gun at Costa, but Viola intervenes, pleading with David to take her home instead. As they leave, David has a vivid hallucination of his deceased wife, and suddenly everything turns bright. The scene shifts back to the facility, where David is being evaluated by Dr. Reza. He remembers everything and insists to her that he is innocent, claiming he has the evidence hidden inside his heart. Dr. Reza listens patiently, but reminds him that the evidence against him was overwhelming and that there is nothing he can do now. She tries to calm him, explaining that he has already served a long sentence in hypersleep, 35 years, marking his 80th birthday. She hands him a mirror, and David is stunned to see his face, now deeply aged and unrecognizable. She tells him that he has only 1 year left to serve before he will be a free man. After putting David back to sleep, Dr. Reza checks his belongings and finds the memory card hidden in his hands. Shocked, she contemplates the truth of David's claims. The camera pans through the storage facility, revealing rows upon rows of chambers, housing thousands of prisoners, each dreaming false realities they've been fed. The camera comes to a stop in front of David's chamber, focusing on his shriveled face, still in hypersleep after 35 years. Inside David's mind, he dreams of going for a jog, just like he used to, and then returning home. Viola greets him warmly, telling him it took him a lifetime to get there. Smiling lovingly, David replies that he's there now. The screen fades to black, and the movie ends.